Hello and thank you for joining us today at the Bramble Patch. My name is Wendy and today on Technicals we've got Alicia. Today we're going to be looking at how to use a Dresden Plate ruler. I am going to demonstrate the basics, but I will show you a few variations that can be achieved using the ruler. Okay, so this is the ruler. We actually sell the ruler here. We use the Creative Grids ruler. And it has the centre circle enclosed in it. So apart from doing a piqued edge on it, you can do it with a rounded edge as well. So that is the Creative Grids ruler. It's the 18 degree, okay? And in there, you actually get the ruler and the circle, and also in there you get a really good you get a leaflet, and it's inside, it's got all the measurements. So if you want to finish up with a 12-inch Dresden plate, it tells you what length segments to actually cut. So it's really informative. Okay, so I'll just set those aside. So I'm just going to show you, to start off with, a few variations on the style of Dresden. This is actually my daughter's that she's done and asked me, well, I asked her if I could borrow it. So this one is actually a table mat that she's done. And on this one, she's just used the one fabric for all the segments. So this is what I'm referring to as a segment. Some people call them blades. If you hear US tutorials, they'll quite often refer to this as a blade rather than a segment, okay? And on this one, Claire has actually, just on the edge, she's done a straight stitch all the way around. So no fancy stitches on that one. That's just a straight stitch to anchor that one down. So that is just a very basic one, but really, really effective. I've actually done this. So this is a little wall hanging that I did. This is one that I put up at the springtime, and I thoroughly enjoyed doing it. This one again is the same shaping on the edge, but I've actually done a seam down the centre, so I've got two different colourways in there. And if I bring this hopefully close to the camera, you will be able to see that I've actually blanket stitched it around the edge. Now that blanket stitch was done by the sewing machine, not by me by hand, but it can be done by hand if you choose to. Also, you can do a satin stitch, you can do decorative stitch, you can do whichever you prefer to actually do. I like the blanket stitch, so I generally do that. And I've just fussy cut and appliqued flowers along the bottom. I just think it's quite sort of fresh and uplifting. So a few different styles that we have. Here we go. No, that's not them. There they go. So I'll start on this one. This one is just done with alternating fabrics. So this has got two different fabrics going round to form the Dresden. This one I have done that has a different edge to it. So instead of shaping the edge, I've just got a straight edge. So I've done the blades different lengths to give me that effect. This one I'm rather fond of. It's spinning, and that was a really nice one to do. This one, it's a little bit different. So these are inserted. So these are inserted into the seams. So again, that's another way of doing it. And finally, this is a technique that both myself and Claire are quite fond of. So this is the Dresden Plate, but it has the piqued edge on the inside as well. And I'm hoping that if I just lay this on the board, I keep having a tendency to actually use blue fabrics for some reason. So I must stop using blue fabrics because they don't show up on my board terribly well. And I've done these with 10 blades. In a whole Dresden, using the 18-inch Dresden Plate ruler, you have 20 segments. So in these, I've actually done 10. So that what I can do with this is just, oh, let me go on this way. It can actually curve around. And what I could do, I could have a sashing in between to separate that so they're coming off either side, and that actually looks really nice. And if I get time towards the end, I will show you actually how to do that one as well. It's very, very simple. Thank you, Alicia. So to start off with, what we're going to do is we are going to look at how we actually make the segments to start with. So all I need is some fabric. So first of all, I'm going to demonstrate. So this is a directional fabric. And the reason I've chosen directional fabric is just to highlight what will happen if you actually cut it in the way stated. I'm hoping I'll cut it from this edge. Alicia and I are trying a new way of filming these so that hopefully you can see things quite close. So it's a little bit of trial and error today because we don't get time to practice. What happens, happens. So first of all, I'm just going to, I've got this pressed and I've just got it single layer. So first of all, I'm just going to trim the bottom edge like so. And I might need to just trim there. Okay. What I'm going to do, I'm going to cut this fabric. I'll do it 6 inches wide, which is just happens to be the width of my ruler. So I'm just going to cut straight the way across. So here we go. Thank you, Alicia. Okay, so now I have a strip of fabric that's measuring 6 inches wide. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to cut the segments. And the reason I'm using this fabric is to show and highlight what happens if you cut it in the normal way. So first of all, the ruler has got all different measurements going through it. And if you refer to the paperwork that comes with it, it will tell you what size to cut it. So all you need to do is place the bottom edge here, this part, on the bottom edge of your fabric. And I'm just going to shuffle this along so hopefully the camera can catch this. So the bottom edge of the ruler here, I'm going to place to the bottom edge of the fabric here, making sure that the black line along the top is laying straight along the top edge of the fabric. And all I'm going to do is cut and cut, like so. Sorry, I'm just going to trim that one up because I was working the wrong way around. I'm trying to do it so that you can actually see how it all works. There we go. Okay, so that's the first segment. Now all the other segments are very, very easy to cut. But this is what happens if you have a directional fabric. So all I'm going to do now, I had the ruler this way round. So now I'm going to put the narrow edge to the top of the fabric and cut. Move that one aside, rotate the ruler around, place the narrow edge at the bottom and cut. Once again, turn this around and cut. And just by doing those few segments, it's enough for me to highlight what happens. Because this one, as you can see, is the right way round. Now, the one that was cut next to it would have been that one. When you turn it round, the animals are now on their heads. So if you're using a directional fabric, every other blade would be upside down. So every segment of every other segment would be upside down. If you wanted them all to be the right way, the way you would have to do that to eliminate as much wastage of fabric would be to cut one segment, move it to one side, and the next one you would have to move it so you get the corner of the fabric to the black line, like so. And that is the slither of fabric that way that you would be wasting. Rather than waste every other blade, you wouldn't have as much wastage. Okay, so that's how you adjust it if you want to use a directional fabric. Okay, so that's the directional fabric. Thank you, Alicia. Okay, so moving on to the other fabrics. What I've got done, I've got two pieces of fabric here on top of each other. And what I generally like to do is actually press them together because it helps them cling together. These I'm going to cut the blades at the same time. So once again, I'm just going to cut myself a strip. And this time we will do a 4.5 inch strip, like so. Thank you. Right, taking the ruler, if you would rather, as you saw, I was having to twist around. If I was at home, I would be moving from one side of the table to the other, unless I was using a rotating cutting mat. And it's all well and good for me to use that on a demo, but not everybody has one at home. So the other way to get around from twisting around or moving around, some people don't have the mobility to be able to get up. They would be cutting sitting down. So the way to get around that is actually, first of all, place your ruler at the opposite end. Now I'm right-handed, okay? So I'm going to place this at the opposite end with a small edge at the bottom and the line at the top. And I'm just going to cut that first edge, like so. Thank you. Okay. And now what I can do is just turn that around, okay, like so. And now I already have an angled edge. So all I need to do is flip the ruler around and cut, turn it around, cut. And as long as your blade's reasonably sharp, there's no problem with cutting through the two layers at the same time. Also, you know everything's going to fit. So there we go. So I've just cut a few blades there. So what we're going to do now, we're going to start and actually sew them to get the shaped edge to it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the fabric, okay, this is white on white. This is the right side of the fabric. I'm going to fold it over and make those edges just meet there. Now, this is the angle you want to sew from. You want to sew from the two open edges towards the folded edge. If you sew from the folded edge first, as it goes, it might shift the fabric, and that way the edges don't meet up properly. So sew from the open edges towards the folded edge and keep going. So what I'm going to do, oh, sorry, I nearly sat on that one, thank you. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to chain piece these. Now we've gone for the 2 canvas today, so I will talk you through what I'm doing. So hopefully it all makes sense. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm just going to place my needle down. Now it is important to be consistent with your stitching. So it's important to have a 1/4 inch all the way through your work, because these rulers are designed to use a 1/4 inch seam. So I've stitched along the first one, and I'm going to take the second one. I'm folding it right sides together, and I'm just going to chain piece these along, like so. Doesn't matter what order, because they're all going to be cut apart anyway. So right sides together, 2 open edges, straight under the foot, right side of the foot on my sewing machine to the edge of the top of the fabric, and just go straight the way along. As you sew off of the fabric, the machine thread will twist, which will help it lock so it doesn't come undone. Okay. So this is what it will look like. So this is chain piecing, and this is what it looks like. So now what we need to do, we just need to snip these apart, okay? Like so. Now, these are obviously still turned, so this is the inside of the fabric. Now, I'm using this colour so that hopefully you can see it. So I've stitched across, and what we want to do is just take that little bit of excess fabric thread off here and here, and I'm just going to cut this at an angle just to eliminate that bulk in the corner, just there. So if you can see that at an angle now, I've cut that corner off. So I'm just going to quickly do that with the others as well. Just going to nip those corners off. Right. Now I'm just going to show you a little trick that you can do. There's 2 ways of doing this. Now, when you fold this through, I personally like to open these seams up, because I've pressed them together, they don't want to part now. That's how good it is pressing them. Okay, right. So I'm hoping you can see I've opened that seam out, and I'm just literally going to just scrape my nail down that seam so it's really nice and flat. And I'm going to turn that through. So I leave my finger inside the point, put my finger towards the end, and just turn it through. Now, I happen to have one of these little gadgets. Basically, it's like a pencil, but it hasn't got a lead in it. And just pop that right in the corner, just to make sure it's nice and sharp, like so. You could, if you wanted to, do it with a pair of scissors. So again, flatten it out, scrape your nail down, turn it through, and this time just use a pair of scissors just to get that a nice sharp point, but don't push too hard because you don't want it to tear at all. Okay, so now I've got them to this stage, but what we need to do now is press them to make sure that we get them central. Now, what I could do, I could just literally eyeball it and just flatten it down and just press. But that's a bit of a guessing game, because if I haven't centered that point properly, the Dresden doesn't look as good. So there's a couple of different ways of actually making sure you can get that in the right position. So first of all, one thing that I could do would be to fold it in half to make sure that these two edges meet, the raw edges, and just give that a little press, like so. So I have a creased line. Then, as I've now got a creased line, the seam that I've already sewn needs to sit on that line, okay? And then it can be pressed, like so, which does work really well. However, if I ever do them with a plain fabric, sometimes if I've pressed it, I can still see the press line, and it takes a lot of spray starch or water to actually remove that line. So I actually do a different thing. Okay, so what I do is actually get just a piece of card. This is just a piece of card that I got from home yesterday. And I will draw a square. Now, it doesn't matter what size it is. I'll just do a 3-inch square, I think. And do just remember to clean the edge of your ruler if you've used one of your fabric rulers. Okay, so once I've done that, Alicia's going to very kindly cut that out for me. And once that's cut out, it means I've got something to work with. And this is the reason that I actually like doing it, okay? This works really, really well. So all I need to do now is take a pen. Doing a grand job here. Thank you. Okay, so Alicia has very kindly cut my 3-inch square out. So all I'm going to do now, I'm just going to draw a line, diagonal line, corner to corner, like so. And I like to do one in the opposite direction as well. Now, what I also do, so this now, what you can do is actually place this inside your point and make sure that that seam is about 1/4 inch out that I did earlier. So I would need to juggle that round and sit that on there and press it. And that is perfectly placed, like so. Now, the other thing you can do is you can do a 1/4 inch line all the way down, just halfway. That then gives you a line to work to if you use bigger segments, because obviously the segments, the piece at the top would be deeper. And that helps you centralize everything to make sure all your points are central. And this works really, really well. So this is something that I do. And once you've done it a few times, literally it takes no time at all. And this will last and last. Don't do the thing that I did. I tried doing it with template plastic, which was brilliant until I melted it. So that's not a good idea. Just use a piece of cardboard. That's all you need. And it works really, really well. So that's something I can recommend. Okay. So once we've got our segments done, all we need to do, I'll just do a couple of white ones. And all we need to do is turn it through, push it out, use my card, pop that in there, look at it, perfect. And as you can see, if I just show you this, you can see how that's sitting. So I know that that's worked really nicely. Okay, right, so what we need to do now is we need to sew the segments together. And to do that, we need to place them right sides together. Now these segments are all the same size, if we remember. So they sit on top of each other beautifully. Now you need to start sewing from the folded edge down, okay? Now a little trick is, don't start from the very top, because what we don't want the loose tails of threads coming out of the top. So what you need to do is place your needle slightly further down. I usually do a couple of stitches and then I reverse stitch off and then all the way down to the end. It doesn't matter about this part, the tails, you're not going to see them, they're going to be covered up. So I'm just going to do that. So I'm placing the needle about 1/4 inch down, put the foot down. I'm just going to do a couple of stitches on there, and now I'm going to reverse. And that way the tails are set down the seam, not at the top. Now I'm hoping that the camera is going to pick this up. This is where the thread is. It's set down. So therefore, when I trim it here and here, there's no threads at the top. And then when I open it up, you've got a beautiful seam, like so. So what I tend to do is just, you can press the seams open if you want to. It does cause more work, and if you do that, it means you can't stitch in the ditch down the centre of the segments. So they look rather nice, just press that way. Okay, so you just keep going. So once you've got those done, I'll just show you what I have prepared over here. Right, okay. So when I make these up, I will make up sections. So I do 5 segments at a time, okay? So what you will finish up with are 4 segments, like so. Then you will sew 2 segments together. Then I would sew those 2 segments together, and then I would join those to that one to make that. Okay. So now you can see how that's looking, and that looks really nice. All the points are even, everything's pointing the way it should do. So what we also need to do now is to work out how we actually place it onto a block or onto a quilt. So what I'm going to do now is just talk you through this. So if this was to go on, say, for instance, a cushion, I don't want to necessarily guess the centre of it. So you can fold it in half and crease the centre. Just get rid of this. So I'm going to actually do this with an iron, because it'll be easier for you to actually see. I only normally finger press it, but for the sake of the camera, I think you will be able to see much easier if I put a really strong crease into it. So I'm creasing it both ways, like so. So I'm hoping that the camera is going to pick up the creases that I put in there. Excellent. Now I'm going to take the Dresden plate that has the centre missing, and I'm going to choose a blade to go on here. So let's have this red one. So if I place the point of this blade here, its partner then needs to sit on this one here. So now we know it's centered that way. But if we then drag that down like so, I now have north, south, east, and west. And there is the center of the block. So now I know that's perfectly in the center of the work where I want it to be. So what I would do then is I would pin with my pin pointing out. And I go north, south, east, west, and I pin every single segment to hold it in position. That way you can ensure that everything stays perfectly flat. Okay, so that was how you would actually center it and make sure you've got it absolutely beautifully flat. All right, so now what we need to do, we now need to work on what we're going to cover that center up with. Thank you, Alicia. So there's 3 different techniques that I have used all of them, okay, and just fetch this over here. First of all, as I explained right at the very beginning, you get this circle included in the kit when you get it, okay. Now, an easy way to do it is to bond a web. So if you was to bond a web, right here, I have should be a green one here, let's see. No, it's gone walkabout. Okay, so if you use bond a web, the center really should be the dotted line. So you need to put that on a window or a light box to see through to get that actually the size that you would want it to be, okay? And then just, thank you, and then just do that in the normal way. That's superb, thank you, Alicia. Okay, so once you've drew that onto your bonder web, you would then press the bonder web onto the wrong side of your fabric, wait for it to cool down, and then cut out your circle. So that is probably the easiest method, and that is the method that my daughter Claire always uses. That is her favourite method. The next method I will explain to you is the method using Vilene. Okay, so this is Vilene with the glue. It's the self-adhesive one. Now, I've tried several different ways of actually doing this, and the easiest way that I find to do it is to draw using the circle onto the wrong side of your fabric, okay? Then cut out the fabric so you have a circle. Now, I have tried cutting the Vilene in a circle and putting it on the back, and I get in a pickle, quite honestly. It never works out properly. So the way to use it, if you want to use the Vilene, is cut the circle of fabric and place the Vilene with the bumpy side towards the right side of your fabric, okay? So bumpy side towards the right side. Leave it as a square or a shape that's slightly bigger than the circle, and stitch all the way around, okay? Once you've done that, you can then trim the excess fabric off, like so. And this is very, very fine, so it doesn't really cause much of a bulk. So just trim that around. Now remember, don't be tempted to press it at this point, because the glue side of the Vilene is facing the fabric. So what you need to do is you need to pull this apart, like so. Just make sure that you're only holding the Vilene, and just put a snip in it. And then you can just extend that cut however you want to. This is a method that personally I don't use if I'm using a light fabric, because for me you can actually see the cuts in it that you make. The other thing you can do that I have used this for is if you want to insert wadding to make it puffy, and that actually looks really nice. So all I'm doing now is I'm just turning that through, and then with a a pointed implement of some sort, run that around the inside. And keep doing that until you have a circle. So now all your raw edges are enclosed. And now you have the adhesive side on the outside of the circle. So it now means that if I wanted to put this on here, I could actually lay this on and press it, and it would stick to it and hold it in position for me whilst I sewn it. This is one that Claire's actually prepared. She's already got it bonder webbed. So that once the bonder web has been removed from the back, can actually be stitched on. So that one's another one that Claire has ready for me to do. And that one could be done the same. I would just want to tidy it up, but do be aware, do not press it, because whatever you press it to is going to stick to. The adhesive part is on the outside. Thank you, Alicia. So my favourite technique is if I was to be using freezer paper. This is the technique I use practically every time. Okay, so freezer paper, shiny on one side, smooth on the other. So all you need to do, again, if you want a large circle, you can actually just draw around that. Or you can do it on the inside. It doesn't matter which. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that one. Now, this, although it sticks, there's no residue, it doesn't leave a residue at all. So I'm just going to give that a press, and that's now stuck to my ironing mat. I'm going to take the one I prepared earlier with a circle on. I'm going to place that on top of the smooth side of my freezer paper, and I'm just going to press that, because a single layer of freezer paper isn't thick enough. It doesn't give me enough to turn towards. So I'm just going to, you'll probably hear it, just peel that off. So all I need to do now is just cut this out, and I've already got one prepared. Just here. Now, this is one that I think I've used about 12 times. You don't have to remake it for every single Dresden. You can use them again and again and again. So once that's cut out, that's another one that I've got that I can use in the future. Okay, so all I need to do now is actually work out how I'm going to do this. So all I need to do now is have a piece of fabric. Alicia, please. Perfect, thank you very much. And I'm just going to press the shiny side of the pelmet violin, of the freezer paper, and press that onto the fabric, like so. Okay. And I'm going to just trim around. Like so. Now I like to give it a little bit more than a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So this is how it looks now. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take best press. So this works really well. Any sort of one like this works. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to take the lid and I'm going to spray my spray starch into the lid, like so. Now, I bought some bits and bobs in here. Perfect. So what you can use a painting brush, a machine brush, a little cotton bud. So I'm going to take the cotton bud and I'm going to wet all the way around here. Really, really soak it so you can see the fabric changing colour. Okay, all the way around. I mean, if you want to spray it, you can do. Just that if I do spray it, you will see it literally goes everywhere. and you do tend up using more and wasting it. So I tend to just put it on with a brush. So all I need to do now is actually press it. So I'm just going to flip this over so that we're in camera view of how I do it. Now, if you want to use an implement to roll this over, you can do, like so. If you're worried about burning your fingers, just use a little stick of some sort, piece of metal, knitting needle, anything. I tend to just use my fingers. So all I'm going to do, I am just rolling the fabric over the freezer paper, and the heat of it will actually just make it turn over the edge. Just mind your fingers if you do it this way. If it's the first time you've ever done it, then do use something else to push it over until you get used to the motion of how to do it. And as it dries, it just holds its shape. And this is the technique I use if I ever want to do needle turn appliqué. The spray starch just holds it all in position. Now obviously I'm doing this really, really quickly. So once that's done like so, there we go. All you need to do now is just remove that. That paper can be used once again and have a perfect circle ready to go in the centre of one of the blocks. So that concludes the tutorial for the Dresden Plate ruler. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye for now.